பித்தா பிறைச்சூடி பெருமானே அருளாலா பித்தா பிறைச்சூடி பெருமானே அருளாலா. This is the temple of Tyagesha or Tyagaraja at Thiruvarur. Thiruvarur is a very ancient and sacred temple town in Tamil Nadu. The Tyagaraja temple at Thiruvarur is one of the Padal Petra Sthalam. It's one of the temples, very ancient temples, on which songs have been sung. Padal Petra Sthalam. The songs Padal here referring to the hymns, the devotional hymns that were sung by the Shaiva devotees, what are called the Tevarams. The Tevaram that you just heard, Pitta Piraichudi Pirumani Arulala, this is a Tevaram composed, sung by one of the foremost among the Shaiva devotees, Sundaramurti, or Sundarar as he is called. Sundarar lived in Thiruvarur. Now, Thiruvarur has, and its environs, Thiruvarur and its neighboring areas, have for centuries seen the flourishing of music, dance, and many other arts. Just about 60 kilometers from Thiruvarur is the ancient town of Tanjavur. Tanjavur is it's a very famous temple town in South India, and it houses the incredible Brihadishwara temple. The Brihadishwara temple, which is World Heritage Monument according to UNESCO. Now, and in fact, Brihadishwara temple has inscriptions detailing the number of dancers and musicians that were attached to the temple. Tanjavur has been the capital of the political capital of many dynasties that ruled South India, beginning with the Cholas and the Pandyas, the later Nayakas of the Vijayanagara Empire, and then still later the Maratha kings. All of them, all these dynasties which ruled Tamil Nadu and other areas, neighboring states, all these dynasties had Tanjavur as their capital. Tanjavur was not only a political center but also a cultural, religious center. And Tanjavur is a very fertile land with the Kaveri coursing through it, and when you have prosperity, the arts also flourish. And so it is that all these, many of these dynasties that ruled from Tanjavur have been liberal patrons of the arts, beginning with music and dance. Raghunatha Nayaka in the 17th century, a Nayaka ruler, was himself a musician, and he wrote a very significant Lakshana Grantha, musicological treatise called Sangeeta Sudha. Later on, in the later part of 17th century, the Maratha rule was established, and King Shahaji has left behind many compositions. He was a prolific composer, and he composed many genres. He was as much interested in music as in dance. And his successors, all the successive Maratha kings, were also liberal patrons of music and dance, and King Sarabhoji too. His contribution is particularly significant in that he envisioned and built the Saraswathi Mahan library, which is still in Tanjavur. It's the Saraswathi Mahal library houses rare manuscripts on varied subjects: music, dance, Jyotish or astrology, Ayurveda, Shilpa Shastra, and what have you. So it is a treasure house, really. Under such munificent political patronage, music and dance flourished, and so did the other arts. Tanjavur and Tiruvarur and many surrounding areas have produced many musicians for centuries. So much so that there is a saying that unless you're born in or near Tanjavur and have drunk of the sacred waters of Kaveri, you cannot be a Carnatic musician. That is obviously a gross exaggeration and certainly not true, but it only indicates the centrality that Tanjavur had in the evolution of Carnatic music. The Carnatic Trinity, or the Mummurti as they are called, Tyagaraja, Muthuswami Dikshidhar and Shama Shastri, all of them were born in Tiruvarur. Though only Dikshidhar lived here for any length of time, but they were all born in Tiruvarur. Before the Trinity, many a musician had left a mark. Besides the devotional outpourings of the Shaiva and Vaishnava devotees that I've spoken about earlier, we have had musicians like Arunachala Kaviraya, Uthukada Venkata Subbayar, Marimutta Pillai, Muthu Tandavar, and others who composed in Tamil, and others like Narayana Tirtha, who all lived in Tanjavur and Tiruvarur, the nearby areas, enriching the musical atmosphere. Now, besides these musicians, of course, there were also other traditions of music, notably the Bhajana Sampradaya, the Nama Sankirtanam, established by Sridhara Iyyaval, and this Nama Sankirtana tradition was inspired and grew from the Maratha Bhajana Sampradaya tradition. There was also the Nelattur Bhagavata Mela tradition. All these factors, so many musicians, so many musical traditions, all of them contributed to a very, very musically surcharged environment in Tanjavur and Tiruvarur and the neighboring areas. Tanjavur was a region that was shot through with music and more music. When we speak of the Carnatic Trinity, we always mention them in this order: Tyagaraja, Dikshidhar and Shama Shastri. Tyagaraja was not the oldest among these, he was not the youngest. Shama Shastri chronologically comes first, Dikshidhar comes last. But it's Tyagaraja who we always mention first, and it is worthwhile pondering over why. And there can be many answers proffered. But another question which is also equally valid is, why only these three? There were good, great composers before these three and after these three. Then why is it that only these three are grouped together as the Carnatic Trinity? There is no doubt that there is a certain privileging of their compositions, and Every Carnatic musician aspires to internalize their compositions, and the compositions of the Trinity are really seen as the bedrock of Carnatic music. Now, why is this so? It's an important question and cannot be easily answered, but I here offer some ideas, some of my own ideas. One is that of course their output. They were very good musicians, they were great musical minds, and they did not compose 10 or 15 compositions, they composed many compositions. Tyagaraja has left, what we have received of Tyagaraja's compositions run to about between 700 and 800. Of Dikshidhar we have 500 to 600 compositions. Shyama Shastri we have very few, we have only 80, though he is reputed to have composed 300, only 80 are in circulation, because these compositions had to be passed from generation to generation from teacher to student, and only some compositions got preserved this way. So in sheer numbers their output is significant. Musically, of course, they are of a very high order, and within the compositions that each composed, so if Tyagaraja's compositions have come down to us in a few hundreds, there is considerable diversity within this corpus. So it's not as if all of Tyagaraja's compositions are alike, which is the case with some other composers. Again with Dikshidhar and Shyama Shastri, within their compositions, the corpus of their own compositions, there is some diversity. And perhaps what is most important is that the literary and musical sensibilities of these three composers, Vagyakaras is what we should be saying, they were Vagyakaras. The musical and the literary sensibilities, their styles are very different. There is a whole gamut here, and within this gamut many other composers can be fitted. So it is that these three are identified as the Mumurti. In fact, many later composers consciously and unconsciously modeled their compositions after one or the other of these three Vagyakaras.